Hello, guys, and once again, I'm back. Thanks so much for your patience. I couldn't record anything for the past 2 weeks, maybe even a little bit more, because I've been playing Serbian top league. Eventually, my team came third. I was playing sixth board and made 7.5 out of 11, which was good because I faced 3 GMs, 6 IMs, and 2 FMs. Made top 5 scores in the complete league amongst 120 players, which is pretty good, and it's promising. It's promising before the Serbian finals that is gonna happen in December. Top 10. So I'll be there, and we'll see what's gonna happen. This video has something completely different in mind, and unlike previous videos, where I just went for something way more tactical, here I'm gonna be highly fashionable. But also, I want to give you a suggestion. In a previously played Serbian league, I've noticed that lots of guys had problems how to trade the Catalan defense. So this is gonna be good for the Queen's Gambit players, for Nimzo Indian, for those who like to play the Queen's Indian stuff, and for all of you who just have some sort of problems against the Catalan defense. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for some recent and top analysis. So after, like, for example, there are so many ways to go into this. For example, from the opening, knight f3, d5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, e6, c4, bishop e7, d4 castles, and when they play castle. That's one line. Another line is d4, knight f6, c4, e6, g3, for example. Then you just go d5, bishop g2 or knight f3. It's pretty much the same. And then you just go bishop e7, castle, castle, and that's the line. Then you have, for example, line with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight f3, knight f6, g3, bishop e7. That actually happened from the Queen's Gambit defense, and you just go into this line. All these variations, those are just transpositions into the same type of position, where my suggestion and vote goes to d takes c4. Before I tell you and show you like the most critical things here, I just want to show you and inform you that this is just open Catalan, where you take on c4. But for example, I've been playing c6 and closed Catalan for more than 15, 20 years with a pretty good results, to be honest. And the plan is very easy. No matter what I do, whether they play b3, bishop f4, knight bd2, knight c3, queen c2, rook d1, whatever, you just always go with the same thing. You just, for example, they just go, the main line in theory always is queen c2 to defend the pawn and to go rook d1. You play knight bd7. They go knight bd2 or bishop f4 or rook d1 or b3, but let's just say knight bd2 or bishop f4. But doesn't matter what I do. You always go with b6. They go bishop f4. You always go with bishop b7. They go knight c3 or knight bd2. You always can go with a rook c8 and break with c5. There is a line with knight h5, followed by f5, going into some sort of Dutch defense, or you can even play d takes c4 with a fairly good results for black lately. But that's not a topic of this lecture. I just want to show you how to play after d takes c4. And that is something very popular lately. So when you take on c4, now white has following options. Absolutely the main move according to stats is queen c2. Almost everyone goes with queen c2, but at some point 2 years ago, 95, it was a very like topical variation with lots of hot novelties on both sides after 95 for white and black. Although 95 should not be a big problem for you, because after 95 you gotta go with knight c6, and this pawn sacrifice is known for more than 40 years, and it's considered to be equalizing by black. So what's the point? If they take knight c6, b takes c6, and now they go with bishop c6, you just go with the rook b8, And no matter what I do, you just swap the light square bishops off, weaken the light squares around the white's king, and break afterwards with c5. Black is absolutely fine in a type of a game like this. I know that I believe Wesley Saw played against Caruana and knight a3. And I also know a game of Michael Adams where his opponent went with the knight a3. The point is, when they go with the knight a3, you just have to take it. It's a little bit unusual to give up this bishop for the knight, but at least you do it for a good reason. And the reason why you actually give it up is because you're just doubling these pawns on the a file and they're worth nothing. So after bishop a6, you want to give the pawn back on c6, but you want to get like full activity and repositioning of your pieces. So after queen d2, for example, bishop c6, rook b8, rook b6, and you just go knight e5. Absolutely fine game for you. Or instead of this, for example, queen c2, f5, for example. Or they go with bishop a6, queen d2. Maybe want to play queen a5. No big deal. Rook b8, queen a5, queen c8, and when they play a4 to play bishop a3, rook to d8. A very special line happened in a game Wesley saw against Nakamura. Rook d4, rook b1, rook b6, and after bishop c5, now he just went with the rook d7. So he sacrificed an exchange for a massive pawn storm on the queen side and very powerful pawns afterwards. The thing is that Wesley Saw had to play rook to d1, and position is fairly complicated with the mutual chances, but for sure black shouldn't have any problems. Desperation isn't popular anymore, and almost everyone nowadays take on c6 by bishop. What's the drawback of this one? Well, they just gave up the bishop pair, but more importantly, they gave up the light square bishop, which is a great defender around the king on g1. So all of a sudden, and for the rest of the game, when they play knight c6, they will win a pawn, and they just won a pawn. But that's one thing. That's one thing. They won a pawn, but they once again left white king with lots of weaknesses on the right, on the light squares on the king side. And here white has two options, knight a3 and queen a4. In the case of knight a3, that's a Kramnik's favorite move. Queen a4 is absolutely done by everybody. Statistically, I believe that queen a4 is, in comparison to knight a3, happens in like 75 to 80% of the cases and games. So if knight a3 Kramnik's favorite move, you just go with rook d8, threatening c5. Queen c2, now you can take because of bishop e3 and rook c1, but you go with the bishop a6. What's the point about this one? As soon as you manage to open up the game, why are you trying to open up the game? Because you got a light square bishop, he's got a weaknesses in the light squares, and your queen can easily go onto the queen side and all of a sudden launch some sort of attack. In this game was b3, bishop c4, bishop b2, rook a c8, and just like you see, Wesley Saw made the draw against Wei that happened a couple years ago in Spain. Positionally, they absolutely have nothing in this position. So after like queen e7, they just go with queen a4, threatening to win the pawn on c4. You gotta do e5, not c5. You gotta do e5, because if you do c5, yes, you will get rid of the IQP, but your idea has to be to open up the light squares and to open up the light square bishop with the idea of weakening the king side and the king on g1 eventually. So after queen a4, e5, d takes, queen takes. By the way, they cannot take by queen on c4 because you take on d4 and the e2 pawn is going to be hanging. So when they play like d takes, queen takes e5. Now once again, they got to go queen c4 to defend on e2. If knight c3, you have an immediate reaction that equalizes the game from the game Rajab Aronian played in Serbia 2016 in European Club Cup. So just like you see after queen c4, you just go with bishop e6. So what's so special about this move? You force this queen to decide where to move. And when the queen moves on like c2, you just play bishop f5 and offer your opponent draw. I'm black, I'm down a pawn. After everything, I'm happy to make a draw. So they gotta go with queen c2. You play bishop f5, and they gotta go with queen d2 if they don't want to make a draw. So once again, you just have to be ready to make a draw. And that's why I believe that the video that I'm right now doing for you is mainly named for a little bit better players, because they can get like all these concepts and positions where they're down a pawn with the black pieces and trying to play for a compensation on the light squares, or for white guys who just don't care about the weaknesses of the light squares around the king, because they have like well-known ways of fighting against the light square bishop and the weakness of the light squares. So after bishop h3, rook e1, rook a d8, queen e3, you just go queen d5. And in a famous game between when you and Leko played in Azerbaijan 2015, he threatened mate after he played knight g4, and after queen c3 played rook a to f2 e8. In many of these lines, if the queen moves, you threaten queen f3. In many of these lines, you threaten rook on e2. They can't take the knight because of mate on g2, so line is very, very complicated with lots of nice counter activity chances for black in all these positions. I don't want to bother you with all these lines. I just want to show you like the main prospects and the main lines here for black. So I've just showed you what to do, and it's time to show you the most critical line. And that is actually why I decided to make this video, because lately black players suffer after queen c2. By the way, on your question, hey Maya, you just keep on explaining queen c2 and knight e5. What happens if knight a3? Knight a3 is not a big deal. You just take, play bishop d7, and oppose the light square bishop with bishop c6. Absolutely, absolutely fine line. I played a game knight e5, bishop c6, knight takes, threatening on d4. If they give up, then my knight is going to be better because they have a broken pawn structure and the bishop is pretty bad. e3, knight e5, queen a4, c3, black is better. I limit the bishop on c1, sorry. So that's one thing. Instead of knight a3, they go knight c3. I just go knight c6. My plan is a rook b8 followed by b5, defending the pawn, and I'll remain a pawn up. Then they can go knight bd2. Aha, you want to get a pawn back? Not this time, baby. So I go b5, and any knight e5 I'll be facing with knight e5. Any a4, the thing is, I'll just go with c6, a takes, knight e5, and black is just good. And finally, any a4, to prevent these ideas with b5, I just go knight c6, because my plan initially could be rook b8, a6, followed by b5. So just like you see, the thing is, we just have to see what happens after that queen c2 line. It's been, I don't know, like 15, 20 years, and they have like so many options and what to do here. They can play, for example, black can play bishop d7, and after queen c4, bishop c6, opposing the light square bishop with the light square bishop on c6. That's one plan. Then another plan is b6, a line that became very popular and that scored lately great for black on top level, and at some point when it showed up around 2018, almost on top level, no one has lost a single game at that time. And b6 is quite interesting, but then they just found some boring ways of trading these positions where black just has to suffer or just has to satisfy himself with the boring draws. And finally, there is a line that I used against ex-Serbian champion Grandmaster Bogosavljevic, who against me played queen c2 and I played b5. I remember at the time when I played b5, that wasn't popular at all. And he went for the most classic and absolutely the best approach. This b5 is a specialty against the Catalan. And the thing is, if they ever play knight e5, you just go with knight e5, but it's not even bad to think of queen d4 here. But I suggest knight e5. And after they go a4, you just go with f6, kicking this knight away, play knight c6, and you have a nice position. But that's something else, and that's not important. You play knight bd2. Well, not a big deal. I defended the pawn on c4. Now I'm opposing the bishop on g2, so I don't care. My bishop on b7 is just good. It's fighting your bishop on g2, so I'm doing good. They gotta go with a4. And when they go with a4, now you have two approaches. The one that I did in the game was I played before, and that was a classic approach until the last year. And so if knight e5, I would just second exchange, and after bishop a8, queen e5, I would play this fantastic line. I played a couple of games, and I won all my games with the black pieces like this, even though I was an exchange down. But the thing was, after b4, he went with the knight after d2, threatening pawn on c4, and more importantly, threatening the rook. So when I played c6, knight c4, I decided to go all in and to take this pawn, rook d1, queen c5, bishop e3, and queen h5. So just like you see, for the given pawn, white enjoys like a full compensation and better activity of pieces, and black has lots of problems with these three pieces. Nakamura tried to prove this. It could be played. I drew that game against Serbian champion. I played a couple more times. I wasn't too happy. It's not my style. I was very passive, and I had lots of problems how to deal with these variations and these positions. So last year, somebody came up with absolutely new thing after a4. So that's why I believe this is like a very modern approach and something that you can all benefit from this lecture very much. It's bishop b7. It's a great line. You don't care about the pawn on b5. It's just important to oppose the light square bishop that is potentially the strongest piece in the Catalan opening. So when they take on a5, now you just get an impression that you play like some sort of a Banco Gambit with the black pieces. What's the point? They can't take on c4, you just take on b5, and two pieces are hanging, and you would even win the game on the spot. So they gotta take. If they take, you take by knight, and when they take on c4, pay attention. You're down a pawn, but only for a moment. Nakamura played more than 20 games like this and never lost a game. So after like bishop d5, queen c3, you just break with c5. What's the point of this approach? Yes, you're down a pawn, but your activity is now way better. If in previous line, white was down a pawn, but enjoyed the full activity and of his pieces and, like a very nice coordination of his pieces, here we absolutely have the opposite approach. Now we're down a pawn, but we now just have a nice coordination of our pieces. This happened in the game Andreiki Nakamura and Bok against Nakamura after bishop e3, knight e4, queen c1, c takes, took by queen, played rook c8 afterwards, and got a great game. What a nice thing to equalize the game in a very unusual fashion for a Catalan opening that is usually very boring and a pretty dry opening. Here, that's not a case. So when they play knight c3, and this is the main line, Nakamura captures, plays knight b5, and defends the pawn on d5. At the moment, you're not even down a pawn. And all you have to do, keep the pawn on c4, defend it, and just break and undouble these pawns with c5. So if they go knight c3, you just take and take on d4. Position is equal, even though they got a bishop pair. But okay, you're just going to give the, pawn back in order to reposition your pieces gladly. So after bishop f4, c5, you're undoubling your pawns, queen a5 and queen c5. Nakamura played already 2 games against Dingley Ran and against Dubov. This year, in a chess.com competition, happened the following game. e4, Nakamura brought it back, played queen a5, played rook to c8, and brought his bishop back to e8. Played knight a6, knight b4, jumped with the knight on d7, went with the queen a6 and knight to d3. So look at this. This is absolutely incredible that in Catalan opening, black can get such a nice activity and lots of nice counter chances that wasn't and hasn't been the case in the past. Hope that you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you're going to be able to apply this really new things in your Catalan or against Catalan practice. Thanks so much and see you soon. Bye-bye.